What is Captain Marvel's weakness? Marvel Comics, what is Captain Marvel's weakness? One of the most notable examples of this came in a story about Carol's own brain turning against her. For a brief time, why hasn't Nick Fury mentioned Captain Marvel before? Samuel L. The MCU is in a perfect position to adapt this storyline for the big screen moving forward. Though her origin story, Steve Rogers may not able to go head-to-head with Carol in a fist fight, and when he's only a human empowered by the super serum, not a cosmically enhanced alien hybrid, but that doesn't mean Steve Rogers hasn't found his fair share of ways to keep Carol down and out when he absolutely needs to, even if it's not by physically fighting her. Steve has of course, it should be noted that Carol and Steve are usually allies and close friends, but superhero comics love their soap opera style drama, so when the two captains have a falling out, it's usually pretty major. In fact, the MCU has already crossed the Civil War bridge, of course, so the risk is somewhat limited unless of course they try their hand at adapting Civil War too. Regardless, another prominent hero Carol's battled isn't technically part of the MCU just yet, but with the Fox/Disney deal all but completed, who knows what could happen. Has been able to beat. Naturally, this sort of weakness is rife with cinematic potential. We've already seen. Another key weak spot would be to put some sort of physical limitation on her powers. Maybe it will circle. Want more Goose? Watch the video below. Meg Downey is a freelance entertainment journalist who specializes in cape and cowl comics, superhero movies, and fan culture. You can find her on
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up.